Welcome to the Phoenix Effect podcast with Elle, Kristen, and Dennis. We are three narrative-trained therapists, and we will be interviewing storytellers from all walks of life. We will explore what people do to find belonging, purpose, and success. Listen in as we delve into the depths of the human experience. If you have a story you would like to tell, stay tuned to find out how to become a part of the show. Are you ready for a good story? Here we go.
I've come to a place that I definitely want to feel like my faith is a source of strength and can be a deeper source of strength. And I have a longing in my soul and a desire in my soul to be more connected with God and with other people. And I'm also afraid because it's hard to find the people. And sometimes when you find ultimately is not, it can be all sorts of pain and hurt can come from the wrong group. So it's really hard. But in much the same way, like we're talking about, we know even therapy can come with hurt and pain. How many people have been hurt by maybe like the wrong diagnosis or there's a lot to consider even in the realm of therapy. And also therapy can be the most beneficial thing that people can involve themselves in. Both of those are true.
A lot of time therapy harm comes from the abuse of power, right? The abuse of power that the therapist has, that the therapist is crossing boundaries or not holding to ethical codes or whatever it is. And that's the same thing as religious harm. It's an overuse or an abuse of power. And so that can happen anywhere. That's why we call them like high control spaces, right? It's not just churches where that sort of thing happens. And as therapists, we're trained to be aware of our power dynamics. Doesn't mean that everyone is.
Yeah. 100% I agree with that. And I'm even curious because I also see another area of major hurt where people are really harming others and it's totally unintentioned. So I see where there is this real abuse of power that leads to people being harmed. And I also see another area where people are just like only allow space for what they know to be the treatment method. So if we're talking about IFS, right, that's the hammer, and then everything is a nail that needs to be hit with IFS. And so that is awesome. And I'm curious which one of those is potentially more harmful or more dangerous.
Like which one of the modalities? Which one of the communities? What do you
First of all, what do you think of that, Kristen? So you put out that so many people are harmed in this imbalance of power or abuse of power, right? We see it all the time. 100% agree with you. And also, even a really well-intentioned therapist can do a lot of harm, which I feel like I've noticed or experienced in my own life with my own family. And that's what I was asking Elle. Those are two different ways I feel might be the two most frequent ways that there is harm being done. But that's just my own opinion.
Yeah, I can tell you have something to say too, Elle. I think I'd say like a couple things. First of all, harm will happen, right? Therapists aren't perfect. We're going to be misattuned at times. We're going to make mistakes. And so again, it goes back to, are you able to repair if there's something that goes wrong? Like how good is your ability to notice and to repair? And also this goes into a lot of what we do with story work of, did your mom really not know that you weren't getting this thing, right? Do people really not know when they're harming someone? And sometimes, yeah, maybe not. But when it becomes apparent, then what is that person going to do about it? And how aware do they want to be of the harm that they're causing when that's being brought to them? Because very rarely is harm not to a person, right? Rarely is it not noticed on someone's face. It's just how aware of it do we want to be?
I feel like so people are coming to somebody that they think can help them with their pain. And whether it's a therapist or a church they think they have a corner on the right way to heal someone. And so when a person's coming for healing and maybe something comes up where they feel like in therapy, we might call it treatment resistant, or in a Christian culture, it's their sin nature. So the person in power doubles down on what they think the truth is. And so they're using what they're identifying as truth as a way to hurt people, to control people. It, does that feel true? Like how I'm describing it? Because that's how I'm
Yeah.
understanding what Kristen said. It is at some point, don't we get a little niggling thought or feeling that something's off here? If I'm attuned to this person, I can see they're in pain, and what I'm doing isn't helping. A good therapist is going to go get supervision. But if they're not, and they're doubling down on what they think the truth is, that's where I think the abuse of power comes. It's when there's an allegiance to what they're perceiving as truth.
This is the modality that heals people. So if you're not getting healed, it's your problem. It's not my problem or the modality's problem, right? So it's not about adjusting to what you actually need. It's about there's something wrong with you, which is what happens a lot in church structures, right? These are our rules. This is our right and our wrong. So if that's not working for you, or if you're still feeling a certain type of way, then it sounds like you probably have some hidden sin in there, or you're just not right with God, or you got to do a little bit more work on your humility or whatever it might be.
If my corner of truth isn't working on you, shame on you.
Yeah, I was, and we can edit this, so we might need to edit this. So my reference, the thing like that jump out at me the most would be like when we were looking for parenting guidance. You know, Kelly and I are looking for parenting guidance. There was a guy in our community that was well respected and regarded. I think he carried a psychiatry license, and he was also a Christian dude. I think he was a well-intentioned good guy, but I remember his advice to us when we went to him. He had this program where it's like, you're supposed to take everything out of the kids' rooms. So if they're not doing the list, then everything is removed. And then little by little, they gain items back for the room. And that was like not what my kid needed. My kid did not need all of his stuff taken from him and to feel more there's something wrong with him. He actually needed parents who would understand him and that could just take more time and connect with him. But nonetheless, I tried thinking that this was the right path because he was a credentialed person with a lot of respect and he held a lot of power. And I remember I initially tried what this guy suggested and just noticed the self-condemnation coming down on me. I know the truth is I'm actually operating as a good parent. Like my desire was good and the harm that I caused was more in the realm of what even Kristen was talking about earlier, where, hey, we're going to do our best and sometimes fall short. And then how do you repair? So I want to be like soft in myself, but it's hard. It's hard when I feel like I'm pretty equipped to be a critical ear to what people suggest and not be so quick to drink the Kool-Aid. And the fact that I drink this guy's Kool-Aid just brings a lot of self-annihilation towards me. But anyway, getting back to what we were talking about, like that's for sure that took place. This dude just had one methodology. Here's the hammer that we use. This is going to work. And it didn't. It made things worse.
And because he was in a position of power, both as a church leader and as a mental health professional, right? You just lose yourself in that as someone that must be the person that knows what you're talking about. And we hold the same values. So why would you tell me to do something that could be maybe not the best idea, right? It makes a lot of sense why you would go against your better judgment in that case and just say, yeah, I trust the person with the power.
Because you're in a desperate place. right? You don't know what to do. You're in pain. And so you're open, you're vulnerable to someone in power that does know. And so you try it. And like a good parent, you followed your own gut that says, this isn't the way. Yeah. Like that's the difference is that's where the power loses its ability to harm is when someone like you pays attention to their own integrity. I've been in the same situation. My biggest parenting failures were a result of taking the advice when I was a young parent of someone that I thought knew what to do. It keeps me up at night, those memories. Yeah. But at least we get back in line with what we know is right. I think we're just so vulnerable when we're at the end of our resources and everything we know for someone to tell us what to do.
Yeah, I felt like that was an apt word, that desperation, where we feel that desperation for wanting and needing real help.
Your story reminds me of a story of mine. I'm not a parent, but I have parents. When I was causing a ruckus in high school, I caused many little ruckuses. No, I did not cause many ruckuses, but I caused a ruckus. And my parents did not know what to do with me. And they took me to the youth pastor and sat me down. And the youth pastor said, the only way to rebuild trust, because you've broken trust, Kristen, you've lied to your parents, you've broken trust. The only way to rebuild trust is to admit everything that you have ever lied to them about. And that will burn the whole thing down and wipe the slate clean. So I did. I told them everything I'd ever lied to them about and was promptly grounded for months and lost all my friends. And later came to find that the only way that my parents had even found me in the situation that they had is because they lied to me. But I didn't find that out until years later. And just the injustice of we're saying we're building a trust, we're to rebuild trust, but it's only going one way, right? There was no honesty coming from my parents. That was a misuse and an abuse of power. And so I don't know. I think there's a lot of situations like that where it's, yeah, I'm going to do what I'm being told to do. And it's not actually in my best interest. But I'm believing that it is because why would this person want to do something that would negatively benefit me?
Why would they want to hurt me?
And so gosh, I feel like I want to go into that story and what that was. What a story, Kristen. As you pondered that guy, what you actually needed versus what you received. I'm curious about that. What do you think you actually needed? What would have been a competent way that he could have addressed that situation? I see so much incompetence in what that.
Curiosity would have been great. Hey, why are you acting out? Maybe you're in pain. Maybe there's something going on, right? Like maybe some investigation. But I think that would have hit a little bit too close to home for my parents to inquire about what wasn't going great in my life at the time. And it was easier to just lay down the law.
Shame, Kristen. As you started to tell the story, your lead in, you said we needed to rebuild trust. For one flash of a second, I thought you meant build little young Kristen needed to build trust with her parents.
Mhm.
And then the story took a turn and it went completely the opposite direction. And so as I'm hearing that, it sounds like Kristen had lied. She must have had a good reason to lie. She didn't trust her parents. And so the trust needed to be built from young Kristen to mom and dad. You must have had such a good reason not to trust them at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But the burden was
Yeah.
placed on you.
Yep.
And then supported by the institution of faith and the institutional support your parents had.
Yeah, I didn't even bat an eye to that, being told that's what I needed to do. Of course, yes, of course I want to have trust. Of course I want my parents to trust me. I don't want like the panic that like what I had done was me acting out my pain and then the panic that this was going to cause more pain and me saying, "No, I'm actually trying to not be in pain." And so I'll do whatever it takes. Just tell me. And then again, that caused more pain. It just felt like whatever you do, you're losing. You're still one step behind.
So the pastor, the youth pastor that's doling out the path, she clearly shows the path that's going to lead to this rebuild trust. Is that do you see that as a misappropriation of this power, or a both?
Probably both. I don't think he asked my parents any questions. It was just the kid's out of line. You got to whack her back in line. Here's a way to knock her back a few steps, right? Expose everything, make her really vulnerable, make her realize how many things. I was like confessing every single stupid little white lie, right? Because I didn't know. I thought that's what, if I didn't do that, then maybe I would go to hell. There's just somebody's going to get me if I'm not totally honest. And so there's this total fear of nothing even belongs to me, right? I don't even get to keep anything for myself. And so when you're so exposed to people of authority, whether that's parents or a spiritual leader or whatever, like they have you under their control.
100%. And even in this story, I'm like, so many different things are coming up, even as it relates to your parents. Like, your parents were not served. I don't know what your parents' posture was when they went to this guy, if they already knew, if they had planned and known what the advice was going to be, or if they were genuinely going to this guy for some real help, feeling like, hey, we've uncovered this and we aligned in order to do it. So we feel like the ends justify the means in the family. And here's what happened. I'm just even wondering, what a shame that your parents actually weren't. What they needed was someone with some strength that could, like, all those things that you said. We ought not jump to conclusions here. Let's try to understand what's going on with Kristen. She is a really good kid. We love her heart. She would do awesome if she could. Something's going on that's preventing her from, let's try to find this stuff out. That's what the parents needed. So I see this almost as a story where both you and your parents.
Yeah, I think definitely that was the only time they ever took me to a pastor and sat me down and said, they took me to therapists and they took me to other people, not knowing what to do with me. But I wasn't even a bad kid.
No,
In the grand scheme of things, what I was doing was nothing. But when you live in that world and even dancing or playing cards is a crime, right? Yeah, it seems like the end of the world if your kid suddenly is starting to do something sinful or do anything that resembles being a kid.
I don't know how early it started, but definitely by the 70s and 80s, I think parents were really sold the idea that you should control your kids with different behavior modifications. And so they're told, here's the formula to produce good children. And so if your children are falling outside of the realms of what a good child does, then that's your fault and you need to go fix it, AKA control your children. And so the anxiety goes up in the parent when they have to bump up against the truth of, you actually don't get to control your children. And that's actually not the point. We have all lost sight of the purpose of having kids isn't to control them and produce perfect people to go out into the world and feel really good about ourselves. Right? It's to get to know them, pursue their hearts.
Yeah, we were raised on if you're familiar with Dr. James Dobson.
Oh, am I familiar with Dr. James Dobson?
Oh, yeah.
I have gotten the same book from my mother. My mother has given me the same book 3 or 4 times about bringing up boys.
Mhm.
I know about Dr. Dobson. Yes.
Oh, yeah. There's some aggravating stuff in there.
Here's how to control your boys better.
Do you know who James Dobson is, Dennis?
Yeah, I think I've heard that name thrown around, and I'm thinking I'm understanding the core messages that Dobson would maintain. Maybe you can give me a quick little synopsis.
We could run down the name of a couple of his books. Dare to Discipline, The
Right.
Strong-Willed Child,
Yeah.
basically how to break your strong-willed child. Yeah.
Break their will. That's the goal.
Yeah. It sounded like the gentleman that I referred earlier was likely a Dobson, part of the Dobson camp.
Yeah.
They throw scriptures in these books, right? And they make it seem like they have a corner on the truth. And if you're not doing these things, here's a scriptural verse about why you should be.
Spare the rod, spoil the child.
I heard something the other day about what that verse actually meant. I wish I had it in my brain right now, but it was very different than what they were using it for in Christian parenting books.
Oh, it doesn't just give you permission to hit your child anytime you want? Anytime they don't do what you want them to do? That's not what the verse means?
I need to go look that up, what that was. Insert it in the podcast later. It comes down to, I don't know, do we get the most desperate when we're trying to control other people?
Oh, say more about that.
Dennis and I are each sharing a point where we felt really desperate and we were really vulnerable to people in authority telling us what to do. And it sounds like your parents got to that point. Were we that frantic? Were we that dysregulated? Were we at our wit's end because we were trying to control the body of somebody else?
Let me think about that. I think people get the most frantic when they feel loss of control, right? So I think about clients. Why are they in my office? Because they feel like they've lost control of a part of their lives, whether that's an internal sense of control or an external sense of control. Maybe not everybody, but that's a general theme, right? Or I'm no longer able to control my emotions the way that I used to. And I need help to put the kibosh on all this disruption that's happening because my emotions are leaking out, right? Or whatever that might be. And I think the loss of control it does feel terrifying. Even for someone who would say that they don't really love being in control, right? There's a reliability and a stability and a predictability that comes that feels grounding to know what to expect and to know that it's going to be something that is going to feel good or safe. Or when it starts to feel like we're out of control and it doesn't feel good, that's terrifying.
Chaos. We want help containing chaos.
I like where we're going, and it's trying to think if I can make sure I'm on the same page with you, Elle. You're using that word desperate, and we're also talking about this idea of control. And I just noticed for me, where I start to feel most distress is when something's happening that feels threatening. It causes this internal distress, and immediately I want to go to shut it down. And particularly like with what even we're talking about here, Kristen, like I notice it would show its face with my kids. If my kids' choices or what they're doing starts to build something, I start to recognize that internal distress. But I would say 5 years ago, I would quickly then try to go and control whatever it is that's causing that by making them change. And I tried to flip-flop it, where what can I change in me so that I can manage this distress without trying to get someone else to change. And I think that's one area that I notice when I look around. Frequently, I see other people trying to get others to go change.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's making me wonder about if it's highly individual, of course. People love formulas. We love to come up with formulas for how things work, and there are no formulas. But this is my theory, the formula I'm figuring out right now. It depends on, I don't have children, but I imagine that type of relationship is different than a friendship or someone professionally, because there's a lot riding on your kids growing up to be a certain kind of human contributing to the world. It's a reflection of you, and you want them to be successful. And I would think that there's a certain kind of pressure that comes with that isn't necessarily attached with other relationships, that ups the ante a little bit. That causes a different kind of emotional response.
And let me even substitute in, if I substitute in that word, I forget what word you said, but I'm thinking, well, what if I substitute in fear?
I don't know if it carries over to other kinds of relationships 100%, but I do feel like I do see that commonly in clients. If I change enough, will somebody else do something different? That's the hope. And it's not a bad hope, especially if you're being mistreated. But we all are experiencing chaos and we're all trying to figure out ways to manage it and survive it. Some of those coping skills are more harmful than others. But we've been dropped in a chaotic world. And most of us don't know what to do. In those boxes that you're talking about, the formulas, it feels soothing for a minute, right? Like a
It's a way to
relief.
control,
Yeah.
a way to make sense of something that it's more nuanced than that. I relate, and my cat doesn't do anything that I want her to do, so
Yeah.
it's real annoying. I definitely cannot control her.
Right? The dogs
Yeah.
are taking things off the counter and then they're vomiting them up. It's like
The
everything.
meaning making for me, like your cat just doesn't even love you.
Absolutely not. She bit my head this morning.
And that's where we end today. We are so glad you joined us. We want to invite you to get involved in the show. First, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. That way, you don't miss out on a future episode. If you're super curious, you can also find us on YouTube. Second, if you'd like to learn more about joining us and sharing your story, send us an email at phoenixeffectpodcast@gmail.com. That's phoenixeffectpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. This podcast and website represents the opinions of Elizabeth Key, Kristen Boskel-John, and Dennis Roberts, and their guests to the show and website. The content here should not be taken as medical or psychological advice. This content is for informational purposes only, and because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. The views and opinions expressed in the podcast and website are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate, we welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. In no way does listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content establish a therapist-client relationship.